Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, I wanted to kind of continue upon this theme that we've been having and entering into the Easter season of looking at the basically the immense love that Jesus has gone through for us. And we have shown this through the buildup of Lent, obviously the Passion, and that not only did he know what he was about to go through, um, but there's a really, in my opinion, no way that the apostles didn't realize that he was God, Messiah, and had seen so much that he was there. And the willingness to suffer, especially after the fact, after the resurrection, after they are the apostles, and to go all the way down the road of suffering and dying just to tell a stranger about what happened so that they might also believe and transform their life. And I look at that in comparison to events we have now. You know, there are people out there that, for good or bad, don't want to talk about things that are real. That's why there's so many networks that are effectively just fluff, fast food on TV. You're never going to get a real substance. You're just eh. And I look at the contrast of these two elements. Not wanting to say something, not wanting to get involved is the saying that was always said when I was growing up. Don't get involved, it's their life. Versus what the saints, particularly the original apostles, did the opposite. You know, they're going into people's villages, telling them they're doing it wrong, and then, you know, leaving. The thing presumably changed, some transformation occurred, which meant some disheveling happened along the way. And then just trust that it all would work after the fact. And obviously it wasn't a complete process. We wouldn't have had the letters from St. Paul if he didn't need to return information to them and, you know, continue the teachings. But it just strikes me how different the current world is now versus then in some ways, mostly that we don't want to act. But in a very real way, there was more you could lose for the apostles than there is now for us. You know, like what's the worst shame you can get now? You can get canceled or you can get put in jail. That's it. Then they were going to get flayed, crucified, ultimately murdered. And you put the two of them in comparison, it's not really comparable. But I wanted to just sit back and look at that observation and really kind of question and push us as an audience. What are we called to do, and what are the actions that we ought to be taking?
Yeah, your observation about the relative safety that we enjoy is an interesting one. Cardinal George said somewhat famously, he was the previous Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago. He said, "My successor will die in bed. His successor will die in prison. His successor will be martyred." That was the trajectory he saw our country on. And so it's one can imagine that. It's impossible to really know how things unfold, but certainly, it's certainly interesting to see. And in some parts of the world, I mean, we also know in the 20th century there were more martyrs than all of the other centuries combined, Christian martyrs. So it's more violent in the world towards Christians than maybe we tend to note on a daily basis. In the relative safety that we still enjoy in the United States, for sure. It's more aggressive in Canada around certain issues in particular, and a willingness to really persecute Christians, even arrest and imprison them simply for speaking against gender ideology or I'm not sure if speaking against euthanasia carries the same weight, but anyway, there's a bit out there to lose, and perhaps getting worse, perhaps getting better. There's been a huge influx of Catholics in the church. Somebody recently said, I heard this argument that Charlie Kirk's assassination is responsible for some amount of the converts to Christianity in general, perhaps Catholicism in particular. It seems a little too soon to draw that conclusion, but it is interesting. There is another example of someone who lost his life, and that was political. But obviously, his political views were strongly motivated by his faith. He was actually in the process of becoming Catholic. His wife is Catholic. But yeah, what should we do? We should be able to share our faith. We should be able to talk to people about Jesus. It's amazing what kinds of social pressures there are around not bringing up uncomfortable subjects for people. And for if I talk about Jesus, am I going to offend somebody that doesn't believe in him? Our fear of offending can be very paralyzing. And obviously there are more abrasive ways and more reasonable or kind, gentle ways to bring things up. And it should be noted that if you bring things up abrasively and start to belittle and affront people, and then you get rejected for it, it's not like, well, I told him the truth. Well, good for you. So we're not just a broadcast system. We're having a relationship with a person, and so we want to also give truth according to the mode of the receiver as much as possible. And what someone is ready, able, willing to take in is important. But I think we can be overly fearful in terms of how we think we're going to be received. I read a statistic recently that young adults, so those from 18 to 30, 70% of them who don't normally have any religious affiliation or religious practice said that they would be willing to say yes if they were invited. 70%. And I think our fear is at least the opposite. 30%, 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Most people will reject you if you ask them. I think that's the fear that we have. But the statistics are the opposite. And people turn out to be much more open to that conversation. And I know that I was. I mean, I can speak for myself. I would have been very open. If somebody were trying to sell me something, if I detected a used car salesman, nothing against used car salesmen, but to use a phrase, if I detected somebody trying to sell me a bill of goods, my hackles are up and I'm, defensive and suspicious. But when I see somebody sincerely telling me about what's been really important in their life, I was very open to that. That was concretely true with the man who invited me to study the Bible with him one-on-one. He was a total stranger. And although there were parts of me that were a little resistant and like, this is weird and I'm not really interested, I think Christians are dumb and whatever else, I was basically open. And he was so humble and authentic. And so it made it easy. I felt free to say no, so I also felt free to say yes. And that was a blessing. The other key person in my life would have been my soccer coach. When I was in high school, my traveling team soccer coach was a daily communicant. He was a devout Catholic. And several of my teammates were also. I would have been very open if they had brought up faith to me. I remember one tournament we went on, and so we had extra time sort of off the field outside of practice. And my soccer coach was sharing some things with me, but more around like increasing human capacity for, speed reading and super intelligence or something. And but I was willing to receive anything. I had so much admiration for him. And if he had told me about Jesus, I would have been very open. If he had invited me to pray, I would have been very open. But I wasn't going to ask either. That's just my personality. I'm kind of deferent and willing to listen. And he's the authority figure. And so it's really for him to bring up. I wasn't sort of aggressively curious about it. And so All of that is to say, we have the greatest treasure to share, and I understand why it's hard to talk about. I mean, I suffer from that too in my own ways. It's uncomfortable. It's easier to avoid. There's nobody pushing me to do it, but that's where we have to push ourselves a little bit. Testify, share the faith. Um, Pope Paul VI said something very provocative in his encyclical Evangelii Nunciandi from the early 70s. He said, "Will others not be saved because we didn't tell them about Jesus? We can't be sure of that. But what we can be sure of is that if we don't tell them, our salvation is in danger." So that's
Hmm.
that's the right push. I need to do it for my sake, at least. God has lots of ways to reach people, but I need to give what I have.
Yeah, it goes along the lines of a sports analogy. Wayne Gretzky always said you can't score a goal from a shot you don't take.
That's right.
Um, so, but one of the things that you said, which was kind of the basis of your answer there, which is, we don't want to be used car salesmen. And I am very studied in this. It's 2 chapters of my book. Um, at the end of the day, the reason that is such a trope and the reason it is so real is the same reason that, in my opinion, why it's hard to bring up uncomfortable conversations, which is we all had this experience. Now, granted, it might get a little bit different due to technology, but we've all had this experience of when we were 3 years old being told, don't you ever lie. If you lie, that is very bad. And then seeing one of our parents blatantly lie to a salesperson within that same week, if not same day and same time. It's part of the human nature of people lie to salespeople. And the reason goes back to the trope of the used car salesman. They're just here to use us for something, just so they can get their commission, whatever. And I mean, this isn't something new. This is in the Bible. I mean, this is part of human nature. No one wants to be used for any capacity. And then it doesn't take too much effort for your 3-year-old brain to go, salesperson made mommy lie, salesperson bad. So therefore, anytime we get into a situation where we are selling, which also includes talking to someone about something that they might not want to experience, or we don't know if it's a perfect fit, is going to bring up internal strife and tension within us, because I don't want to be the person who makes someone else lie or be uncomfortable. Like, that is hardwired into your brain. It's just the way that it is. So that is really the challenge that I teach people. Again, I'm doing this through the prism of sales, but it's 100%. It's the same mechanism in our brains. Is how do you gently go in and use your adult mind to speak to your younger self and saying, yes, they might not want to hear this. They probably will. Because let's face it, the only people who go to a car lot are someone who at least looking for a car. They're a self-selecting group. And it's not saying that, you walk around the street and, as you said, hey, you're doing it wrong. If you would do it this way and say 3 our fathers, and your life would be so much better. And I told you, so it's on you now. But no, the goal is actually to build a relationship and be a witness in that regards of, well, how is this being a Catholic, being a Christian, actually helping your life? And that is the communications to share and to grow with each other. So I wanted to share that because just on a scientific level, I know that that's what people are going through. And obviously everyone has their own individual versions of that, but we all have that shared experience. Um, and it's universal across societies, not just the American culture. So I wanted to share that and be just something you can ponder. What is holding me back from talking about something uncomfortable? And the chances are likely it's going to go back to your very early childhood and the witnesses that you've had from your parents. So, Father, with that being said, there's only a couple of moments left in this episode if you would like to bring
Yeah,
it
thanks
home.
for bringing that out, Joe. I'd love to hear more about that too. Some of those insights from your chapters from your book there. Um, yeah, the idea of manipulating others and being manipulated. I just was thinking of I've been edified by going out to dinner with some people who are who will ask the waiter or waitress, what's your favorite thing on the menu, or what do you recommend, or what are people eating here? And I realize when I hear that, there's this resistance in me because I'm like, they're just going to say the most expensive thing on the meal. They just want to sell me a bigger ticket so that I'll pay them more, tip or something. It's really strong, this resistance to being manipulated, to being used, and to have the trust that I'm going to receive an honest response. And then I'm so delighted. The reality is, in every case, when someone is asked that, it's been a wonderful encounter as we develop a relationship. And I know that's a goes through the heart of your book too. It's like, yeah, if you want to be a good salesman, like develop relationships with people that they feel like that you're on their side because you actually are on their side. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
be on their side, and, and
Yeah, summarizing the entire book, that's it.
so it's like, yeah, maybe you can get them to buy the expensive thing, but it's better to get them to buy the thing that they want to buy, and then actually develop a relationship and ongoing sales, and or at least they'll buy something rather than nothing because you actually connected with them and cared about their life and want to help them with whatever their goals are. And as you said, it's what John Paul II called the personalistic norm, which is that a person is an end in and of themselves, and it is never permissible to use them. And my I'm always looking for exceptions when I hear these absolute statements, and I think, well, what about the person at McDonald's? What about the person at the shoe store? What about the person? Aren't we just using them? Well, yeah, you could be. And that's the point. Pay attention to how you're treating that person. Do we have a shared goal, which is that there are goods and there is money, there is trade, the good of the customer? We're both coming away from this towards, we're working together towards a shared goal of one person providing goods, another person providing money, and both people being happier at the end of the interaction. And if we use a person, it's interesting with all of the AI stuff now and the substitute salesman, as we can use a computer screen or an automated interface or a variety of other things, we end up doing a lot of dehumanizing, or we could be, if that attitude transfers then back to people.
Yeah, it's amazing. You've brought up that example before, and I know we got to cut this short, but to give one quick thing that you can do that'll make a huge difference and really prevent you from getting down this mindset of using each other is consciously, either audibly or writing out a thank you note, makes a huge difference in that regards. And if it will feel awkward at first, but just do it a couple of times over the course of this next week. Just write a thank you note. Hey, thank you for introducing me, or thank you for bringing up this point during that lecture, or that whatever. Just something that shows that you are thankful and you are paying attention to them more than a surface level can really go deep. And it's amazing how much it all intertwines into building meaningful and happy relationships. So hopefully people can take that with you throughout the course of this week, and we will be with you again next week. So thank you all. We'll be with you next week.